Hi guys, welcome. This is an original Rune Stories and I'll let it speak for itself. Let's begin.
You are a liability to this family name and you are out of the will, my father said, pointing a shaking finger at the door. He didn't ask who the father was. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't even do the bare minimum TV dad thing, like sigh dramatically or rub his temples. No, he went straight to exile, like we were in medieval England and I'd brought shame instead of a baby. My pregnancy was just convenient cover, a smoke bomb he tossed, so he could shuffle me out before I had the chance to expose what he'd really been doing. I didn't cry. That part always surprises people. They expect tears or screaming or a lifetime movie slap. Instead, I calmly reached under my chair, because yes, I'd come prepared, pulled out a small gift box, the kind you'd expect to hold a bracelet or a pair of earrings, and placed it gently on his playmat. Inside were 3 years' worth of unpaid loan notices he had forged in my name. Neatly stacked, alphabetized, festive even. Then I turned around and walked out into the snow without saying a single word, like the world's pettiest mic drop. Before I tell you what was inside that box and how it destroyed his life 7 years later, drop a comment. Seriously, where are you watching from right now? Your couch? Your break room? Hiding in the bathroom at work? I want to see how far this story travels. 7 years is a long time to stay angry. It's also, coincidentally, the exact amount of time required to build a portfolio capable of swallowing a man whole. I was standing in my office, forehead resting against the glass, staring out at the financial district skyline like every dramatic CEO you've ever seen in a Netflix thumbnail. The glass was cooled, grounding. I was no longer the shivering, pregnant girl in a thrift store coat that smelled faintly like someone else's cigarettes. I was 29 years old, the founder of VM Holdings, and I specialized in a very specific corner of the market, distressed debt. Translation for the non-finance people: if your bank has given up on you, I'm the one who buys your mess at a discount and makes it my problem. I bought bad loans from banks that were tired of chasing deadbeats, and then I turned those deadbeats into profit. Capitalism, but make it personal. I walked back to my desk and tapped the spacebar. The screen flickered awake, revealing a spreadsheet I'd been building for 6 months. It wasn't a hit list. It just looked like one. It was a balance sheet. At the very top sat GBU, my father's construction company. The numbers were bleeding red, the kind of red that makes accountants sweat through their button-downs. Gavin had always been phenomenal at shaking hands and absolutely disastrous at managing cash flow. He over-leveraged himself on 3 commercial projects that went nowhere. Empty lots, half-finished dreams, and one very expensive hole in the ground. Now, the interest was chewing through him like termites through drywall. He thought he was fighting a bad economy. He thought the regional banks were just being difficult. He blamed inflation, the Fed, probably millennials. He had no idea the invisible hand squeezing his windpipe belonged to me. I didn't use magic. I didn't hack a mainframe. There was no hoodie, no green code raining down a screen. I just did what any aggressive creditor would do. I called the vice presidents of the 3 community banks holding his overdue notes. They were exhausted, drowning in excuses, and terrified of a default wrecking their quarterly reports. I offered to take the toxicity off their books for 60 cents on the dollar. They didn't negotiate. They thanked me. They signed. And just like that, I became the primary owner of Gavin's debt. I scrolled down to the total. $450,000. That's not a fortune on Wall Street. It's lunch money to a hedge fund. But to a man like Gavin, who leveraged his reputation just to lease his luxury car, it was a death sentence. He was drowning, and I was the only one holding a life preserver. My intercom buzzed. My lawyer, a man I paid extremely well to be the face of my operation, so my father wouldn't see mine until it was far too late. He told me Gavin had finally felt the pressure. He was asking for a meeting, wanted to know if VM Holdings might be interested in a restructuring deal. I smiled. Not a happy smile, more like the smile a hunter wears when the trap snaps shut and the forest goes quiet. Gavin was arrogant. He would assume VM Holdings was some faceless corporate monster he could charm or con, just like he'd charmed or conned everyone else his entire life. He'd think he could walk into a room, flash his teeth, crack a joke, sign a paper, and kick the can down the road for another year. I told my lawyer to set it up. Offer him a lifeline, I said, but make sure he knows the window closes in 48 hours. I needed panic. I grabbed my coat. The acquisition phase was over. The liquidation was about to begin. I drove to the meeting in silence. No radio, no podcast, no nostalgic songs. I needed to hear my own thoughts, because for 7 years, I'd let his voice drown them out. People love to ask why I didn't fight back sooner. They assume I ran away because I was a scared pregnant girl who couldn't handle the pressure of single motherhood. That's the version Gavin tells at his country club, over whiskey probably. The heartbroken father abandoned by his wild daughter, who disappeared into the night. But that's not why I left. I didn't leave because of the baby. I left because of the signature. I was 18 when he made me the corporate secretary of GBUD. He said it was a formality, resume padding, a father helping his daughter get ahead. I was young. I trusted him. He slid a stack of papers across the table and told me to sign. So I did. What I didn't know was that I was signing personal guarantees for high-risk commercial loans he had already decided not to pay. He used my clean credit like a fresh vein when his own ran dry. When the notices started coming, I asked him about them. He laughed, called me hysterical, told me to focus on my little life and let the men handle the business. I remember trying to rent an apartment 3 months after I left. I was 6 months pregnant, wearing a coat that wouldn't button anymore, standing in a leasing office that smelled like stale coffee and floor wax. I had the deposit. I had a letter from my employer. The leasing agent looked at her screen, then at me, with that special mix of pity and judgment reserved for people whose lives have clearly gone off script. She told me she couldn't rent to me, said my credit report was a disaster. I slept in my car for 2 weeks after that. 2 weeks. Until I found a landlord who took cash under the table and didn't ask questions. I spent those nights shivering, whispering promises to my unborn daughter in the dark, swearing that her mother was not a failure. I wasn't a deadbeat. I wasn't irresponsible. I was the victim of identity theft, and the thief was the man who was supposed to protect me. That was why I was there now. That was why simply bankrupting him wasn't enough. There's a concept I think about often: the thief of dignity. You can steal someone's money, and eventually they can earn it back. You can steal their property, and they can replace it. But when you steal their name, when you use their identity to paper over your own incompetence, you steal something far more valuable. You steal their dignity. You force them to walk through the world branded as untrustworthy, while you stroll around shaking hands and collecting praise. Gavin spent 7 years telling the world I was the mistake. He let the family believe I was the one who couldn't manage money. He let me carry the shame of his greed like a scarlet letter. If I just took his company, he'd spin it. He'd cry hostile takeover, blame the economy, cast himself as a martyr crushed by forces beyond his control. He'd lose the business, sure, but he'd keep his dignity. I couldn't allow that. I needed his signature again. But this time, I didn't want a guarantee. I wanted a confession. I wanted his name on a document that admitted, legally, irrevocably, that he was a fraud. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, an email from his lawyer. His client was requesting a clause protecting his personal vehicle from any future liquidity events. I laughed, out loud, a sharp, humorless sound that bounced around the quiet car. He was worried about his Mercedes while he was about to lose his soul. Priorities. I pulled into the parking garage of the law firm and checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I didn't look like the girl who slept in her car anymore. I looked like the woman who owned the parking garage and the building on top of it. The conference room adjacent to mine was soundproofed, but the high-definition video feed on my monitor caught everything. The rustle of silk, the scrape of chairs, the arrogant clearing of throats. I sat in the dark, watching. I wasn't hacking anything. I owned the shell company that leased the suite. On the long mahogany table in the main boardroom, I'd placed a sleek laptop facing the empty chairs. The webcam was active, its small green light glowing steadily. I told his lawyer it was for silent partners in Zurich to observe the proceedings. Old money loves secrecy. Gavin walked in first. He hadn't changed much in 7 years. The stress lines around his eyes were deeper, and his suit hung a little loose, like he was shrinking inside himself, but the swagger was intact. He tossed his coat onto a chair with the careless confidence of a man who believed he was about to get away with murder. Behind him came Justin. Seeing him on the screen sent ice through my veins. My ex-boyfriend, Lily's father, the man Gavin had forced me to hide from. Justin had aged poorly, soft, puffy, bloated with the kind of excess that comes from too many expense account dinners and not a single consequence. He carried Gavin's briefcase like a loyal lieutenant. It was pathetic. He traded his own child for a mid-level management role in a dying company. Gavin mocked the office, calling it a waste of money meant to make venture capitalists feel important. He dropped into the head chair, ignored the open laptop, didn't even glance at the glowing green light. To him, technology was just a toy for people beneath him. Justin asked if they were sure VM Holdings was legitimate. We'd moved fast, no due diligence. Gavin snapped at him to stop sweating, said we weren't buying the books, we were buying the brand. He still believed the G-Build name meant something. He laid out his plan casually, take the liquidity injection, put out the immediate fires, then refinance again in 6 months. I leaned closer to the screen. There it was, the confession. He wasn't fixing the business, he was cycling debt, a junkie chasing his next fix. Then Gavin told his lawyer to move $50,000 to a Cayman account as soon as the wire hit. He refused to lose the deposit on his lake house just because suppliers were whining about invoices. When the lawyer cautioned him to wait for the counterparty, Gavin laughed, a dry, hacking sound, and said the whole thing reminded him of his daughter. He mocked how I used to worry about permits and budgets. When Justin said my name, Gavin's voice dropped. He told him not to say it, called me weak, said I couldn't handle the pressure of the life he'd built, speculated that I was probably waiting tables in some dive bar in Ohio, blaming him for my failures. A bad asset, a write-off. I stared at his pixelated face. He didn't see a daughter. He saw a line item that failed to return a profit. My finger hovered over the microphone button. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him that the waitress he was mocking owned the building he was sitting in. But screaming is for victims. Executioners stay quiet until the blade drops. I checked the time. My lawyer was in the hallway waiting for my signal. Gavin was comfortable now, safe, superior. Exactly where I needed him. I texted Marcus. Send him in. Marcus entered with the calm of a man who knows how the game ends. No apologies, no handshake. He placed a heavy leather binder at the center of the table and remained standing. Gavin didn't look up. He dragged the binder toward himself, flipping past 20 pages of legal definitions like an addict skipping foreplay. He was hunting for one thing, the number. He found it on page 4. $450,000. He smiled, said it cleaned the slate with the regional banks. Marcus told him the line of credit was contingent on the signature. Gavin pulled out a gold Mont Blanc pen, definitely bought on credit, and hovered over the line. Then for half a second, instinct kicked in. He hesitated, flipped back a page. Clause 14. My heart slammed into my ribs. Clause 14 was the kill switch. He asked about default triggering immediate acceleration. He was reading. He wasn't supposed to read. Marcus checked his watch, looked bored, said the wire window closed at 4 o'clock sharp. 4 minutes from now. Miss it, funds sat in escrow all weekend. Terms would be re-underwritten Monday. Rates had gone up that morning. A beautiful lie. There was no wire window. I controlled the money, but Gavin didn't know that. What he knew was payroll bounced tomorrow. His Mercedes was scheduled for repossession Monday morning. I watched the greed wrestle with caution and high definition. Fear won. He snapped that Monday was too late, turned the page back, pressed pen to paper. Ink flowed. Big, looping letters. The signature of a man who thought he mattered. He ordered Justin to witness. Justin signed eagerly, already spending money he didn't have. They had no idea what they'd done. In New York commercial law, a confession of judgment is the nuclear option. By signing it, Gavin waived trial, counsel, notice, everything. He didn't take a loan. He handed me a loaded gun and pre-approved the trigger pull. Gavin closed the binder smugly, demanded wire confirmation. That's when I stopped hiding. I walked in wearing a tailored charcoal suit, not the thrift store coat I disappeared in 7 years ago. The room died. Gavin looked up, annoyed, then recognition hit. Color drained from his face. I told him to sit. Justin protested. I calmly introduced myself. VM Holdings, Valerie Marie. I asked if they seriously hadn't checked the LLC filing. Were they that desperate for cash? Gavin tried to recover, said buying his debt made me his partner, claimed he had 6 months before payment. I slid a manila envelope across the table. Inside were dated photos from a Newark repossession yard, taken yesterday. The Caterpillar equipment he'd listed as collateral was already gone. I quoted the clause, collateral must be owned and lien-free. Default wasn't 6 months away. It was immediate. Execute, I told Marcus. He explained the judgment was already filed, accounts frozen, liens placed, repossession in motion. I looked Gavin in the eye. I didn't sue him. He'd waived that right. Justin yelled it was illegal. I said it was commercial law, and done. Gavin collapsed, tried to play father. I told him he stopped being one when he forged my name and left me sleeping in a car. He wasn't a father. He was a bad investment. And I just liquidated him. Then Justin smiled, too calm. He revealed the backup plan. A process server handed me an ex parte custody order. Lily was leaving today. They thought they'd won. I asked about the retainer. Justin proudly held up the check. I read the routing number and told him it was drawn on an account I'd frozen 4 minutes ago. That check would bounce. His lawyer would vanish by sunset. Justin's smile died. I told Gavin he'd just admitted to perjury. Marcus would report it. No money, no leverage, no lawyer. Fear filled the room. I told them to leave. Justin crumpled the papers and walked out. Gavin lingered, hoping for mercy. I gave none. He shuffled away quietly, a man who sold his soul and got nothing.